Welcome to Talking Giants, presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, and I am here alone. No Justin on today's episode. The show's just got some things going on. No, I really wanted to make this clickbaity because I wasn't on the last episode. Justin wasn't on the episode. Me and Justin haven't just recorded a me and him episode in over 2 weeks. It's been a weird post-draft off season. And be and just really get people did you listen to the last Talking Giants, and try and get people there. But Justin is just sick. He's just regular old sick. So he's not here. So I'm on vacation, but doing a solo mailbag, and we got to talk about Darren Waller retiring at the top. So we're going to start with the Darren Waller stuff and get right into it, because it's kind of I had a thought yesterday. Imagine if this was just sprung on us, right? Imagine if that rumor never came out. And we're just having a random June, and you're enjoying Sunday, a Sunday afternoon, meal with your family or your friends or whatever, and then you just get the news that Darren Waller's retiring. But we essentially knew this was happening. But I always held out some chance that he might stay because of the money, right? It's got to be hard. I cannot imagine passing up that money, right? And I'm someone who tries to view myself as, hey, quality of life, but that's just a lot of money to where he could have just showed up for another year. But let's get into it. Darren Waller officially retires, calls it a career, giving up $12 million this year and saving the Giants $11.6 million in cap space, since it is a post-June 1st cut retirement type of deal. So it's pushing $4.9 million of dead cap into 2025. For me, this was the hope. Once it went from someone contemplating retirement to clearly he doesn't want to play football, right? We had heard this news in February. The story broke in March. And at that point, I was kind of 50-50 on it still because of the injury history. But I was you know what? Guys go through a season. It's tough. It can be a grind. And immediately after the season, you may not want to play anymore, but then you kind of reset, refocus, and you want to go. Right, so at that point, I was kind of 50-50 because, again, I'll talk about why Darren Waller is not some bum. People are viewing Darren Waller his last year with the Giants, or his only year with the Giants, as Kenny Galladay's last year, and it just wasn't that situation at all. But once it went from drawing out all the way up until, again, essentially mandatory minicamp 2 days before that, missing all the OTAs, missing everything, it was very clear that he just didn't want to play football, right? And the only contemplation was, again, passing up that money. And he talked about that in his video. So you pair him not wanting to play football with his injury history. It's just a bad mix, right? If he was a guy who didn't miss games, right, or only had a game missed here or there, missed 2 games in the season, then I would be okay, yeah, is his heart not in it? But guess what? He's an upgrade. He is a great player, or a really good player for this team. I can overlook that his heart may not be a fully 100% bought in, right? At the end of the day, results are what matters, not your heart. But that, with not wanting to do the preparation to get yourself in shape and stay in shape and come back from an injury if you're there, the things that Darren Waller did last year, which I want to talk about in a second, then I just don't think it's a good mix, right? This isn't Michael Strahan coming off of one of his 2 injured seasons. This isn't Brett, in 2007. It's not Brett Favre coming off of an NFC Championship game season where they lost in overtime. This isn't Jason Kelce coming off of the Super Bowl loss season where he's I don't know if I have another year in me, comes back and plays great. It's not that situation. It's a guy who's been often injured and has just kind of fallen out of love with the game, right? He's lost the passion for the game. He's talked about how that's happened slowly over time. He doesn't hate football, but he's just lost the passion for it slowly over time. And it's just a guy who's missed significant time in the last 3 seasons and has lost that love of the game. So this is what I wanted, for that, to clear that money. Now, there's 2 ways you can attack this. We've talked about this on segments. Could the Giants go out and a cornerback cornerback is a need on this team, right? I saw Mike Clay put out the Giants have the 32nd ranked secondary in the NFL. I would need to go and look through all the secondaries, but if you don't have any fear about the secondary, then you're just you're just wishful thinking. It's delusional if you don't have worries about the secondary. We talk about I saw Steven Toronto say that if Deonte Banks gets injured, if he gets injured, he hasn't proved he's a cornerback 1 in the NFL this year. He looked solid as a rookie. He looked like he belonged, but going from looking like someone who belongs to a cornerback 1 is a whole different animal. And when he got cornerback 1, wide receiver 1 treatment, he got beat, right? That stretch of games in the middle of the season where they were putting him on wide receiver 1s, he got beat a lot. All right, so he hasn't even proven that. We hope that he can become that. He has all the ability in the world. We should expect that out of him, but it's not a given. You have Cordell Flott on the outside, a rookie in Drew Phillips on the inside, and then a rookie safety in Tyler Nubin and Jason Pinnock, who's like a nice player, but again, he's not like some huge advantage to your team. He's just a really good athlete, and again, I still think there's things he needs to learn about the safety position. And then that's, again, if someone gets hurt, then you could just be in a total mess with the secondary. So I just think adding a veteran corner to this team, whether it's Gil, and I don't know what these guys are going to get on the open market, right? If they're asking for like $5-6 million, then I'd be doing it. If they're asking for $10-11 million, you got to use all that Darren Waller money, then I would probably be a little more hesitant to doing that. And I would just use that money to try and get through the season without having to restructure Andrew Thomas's contract, because it just sucks to continue to have to restructure guys' contracts. Part of this situation is that they built the Daniel Jones contract to be restructured, but now that they don't want to touch that for obvious reasons, now they're in this situation where, you know, they're cap stricken in a way where they'll have to either move money around or now use this Darren Waller money. So I would like to get a corner. Dalton Risner got signed. I think there's some other offensive linemen that could be worth signing. You know, Greg Van Roten, who was with the Raiders, and Carmen Brasillo last year. So there's guys that are being out there. So I'll be interested. I would like them to use some of that money, right? I don't need you to go out and use all that money, but I would like the Giants to spend $6 million on a player, on a starting level player on this team, because the depth is a worry and the stars are a worry in a lot of important positions, offensive line, corner, and we'll get into all that. And then when it goes to just Darren Waller, right, I've been kind of waiting for him to retire to officially do this. And again, I don't think it's the large majority, but there is a good amount of people who are just shitting on Darren Waller, and I just don't get it. If you want to shit on someone, do it on to Joe Shane, right? If there's anyone that deserves it, it would be Joe Shane. Which I don't look at this Darren Waller trade as like how it was an L. It sucked, but I don't look at it as how could someone do this. Waller was the team's leading receiver when he got injured. And when he got injured, he was leading the NFL in tight end receiving yards. And was doing this while playing through injury. He got that hamstring injury that came back up week one, before week one versus the Cowboys, and played through it. And again, was leading the NFL in tight end receiving yards. More than Travis Kelce, more than Sam Laporta. Darren Waller was number one. He was leading the team in receiving by a wide margin, and he still ended up second on the team in receiving over everyone's heroes, Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt. And it wasn't just, he was getting volume because it was a bad team, bad receiving. He had a 71% catch rate. Like, he ended the season on a 70% catch rate, right? Like, if you look at just before he got injured, he had 35 catches and 380 yards. That would have been on pace for 85 catches and 922 yards. Is that good? Like, I think that's pretty damn good. I think it'd be the best receiving season the Giants players had since Odell Beckham Jr. And if you just look at what his official on pace would have been, it would have been 79 catches for 847 yards on a 70% catch rate. And that was with the last 4 games when he came back from injury, didn't have to come back from injury. Was on a pitch count, right? And was still putting up solid numbers on a pitch count, playing 60% of the snaps and still putting up, 50 to 60 yards per game. So I just don't understand why anyone would shit on Darren Waller. Someone who showed up to all the OTAs and training camp in shape, ready to go. Dominated, right? Dominated through that camp. The idea that that was fake. No, it was absolutely real. He was really good and then he got injured. That's what happens when you trade for Darren Waller. You get injuries. As far as attitude and stuff, he contributed to the community, doing events. Even his teammates let him down by not showing up. Like, there was an event Darren Waller did, and some of his teammates didn't show up without notice and kind of left him there, holding his putt in his hand and making him look like a fool. You know how bad that feels to have an event and say, this person's going to be here, this person's going to be here, and they just don't show up. You know how much anger would be in me if someone that did that to me? Yeah, but he didn't say anything. And then, on top of that, he could have easily showed up this year, hopefully played, right? If he got injured and had, hey, if I get injured, I get injured, and I'm not rushing back, right? And collected a lot of money. Guess what? He didn't do that. He kind of knew, I'm not going to do that. I'm not just going to show up and collect a check, right? Isn't that what we want out of isn't like the cookie cutter player that we want? Like, yeah, he got injured. He can't control his own injuries. He's not the one who traded a 3rd round pick for himself. So the guy showed up to this team in shape, working his ass off, showed up to every offseason activity, was awesome during training camp, was a good teammate, was a worker in the community, played through injury, came back from injury. And then when his heart was out of it, he decided, hey, I'm not going to come here and collect a $10 million check. Like, if you're not saluting that as a football fan, like no matter what area you are, then what do you salute? Like, is it just you hate someone who gets injured? You hate someone that's hamstrings gets injured? Okay, because now I'm going to start hating on your family members that get sick. Yep, let's hate Justin Pennick because he's sick today. What a piece of shit he is. So the small portion of people who have reacted negatively to Darren Waller as a person, I truly can't stand you. Like I cannot stand you if you react personally to Darren Waller. If you say, hey, I never wanted to trade it for him, I'm glad they made this decision, or I'm glad that he's not going to be here this next year, understandable. But if you have some animosity for Darren Waller as a person, I think you're a loser. Now, hey, I'm not going to stop you from making jokes about his rap songs, and he talked about his video of having what seemed like an anxiety attack where you had to, call the ambulance and, thought he might die in a hotel room that week after he got injured, right? And I don't think he's a total sympathetic figure, right? Like, with his marriage and stuff, I don't like talking about people's relationships, but he obviously brought some of that on himself, right? We all, can go figure out what happened. Like, he brought some of that stuff on himself. So I don't think he's a total sympathetic figure. But I salute someone who's puts $10 million, puts his what he wants to do with his life over, an extra $10 million a paycheck. Like, those are the type of people we should salute. Now, again, do I agree with everything he probably thinks and believes? Do I think he could be misguided in some things? Do I think he's made mistakes? Yeah. But the idea that as a football fan, we shouldn't like him is just crazy to me. And again, I know it's not a lot of people, but I wanted to talk about that. And then from the Joe Schoen portion of this, it definitely goes down as an L move, but I don't think it was this horrible process L. I remember talking about Darren Waller last offseason in these summer episodes when we have guys on to interview him, and we're like, if the Giants are competing for the playoffs and Darren Waller misses 4 games, but he plays well and he's ready to go if you make the playoffs, you kind of sign up with that, right? We didn't go into last year thinking, Darren Waller never going to miss a game, right? Those injuries are a thing of the past. It was the Raiders trading room. No, we knew the injuries were there. We just hoped that if and when it did happen, it would be limited to 4 or 5 games. He ended up missing 5 games, but the Giants were so out of the hunt that it didn't, it goes down to L because it didn't, even if he's there, you're not making the playoffs. But I don't think the Giants are crazy for thinking they're a team that can compete and get better, right? They made it to the playoffs. They won a playoff game. You say, oh, well, horrible defense. Okay, well, they outscored a really fucking good offense in the Minnesota Vikings as well. And they signed Daniel Jones. Obviously, that's a mistake. And they look to improve, right? They couldn't improve the wide receiver room that drastically, but they did add Jalen High in the draft. And you go out and you trade a 3rd-round comp pick for Darren Waller, right? I don't think that's a crazy... think about how bad last season went, and they were 3 plays away from winning 9 games, right? So I don't think it's that crazy for this move. Again, it goes down as an L. You can't trade for a guy, have him miss 5 games and retire the next year and say it's a W. But I just don't... I don't look at that and it's egregious. And you guys know, I have no problem nitpicking the way Joe Schoen builds the team and it's going forward and his drafts and stuff. But I actually think the trades have been pretty good. And for being a 3rd-round comp pick, I don't look back at that and think it's some awful trade. So that's it. It's with Darren Waller over. Unfortunately, I don't think his rap career is going to take off. I hope he handles whatever's next for Darren Waller. I hope he handles it well and gets well. Obviously, maybe he did, but there's nothing out there through all of this mental anguish and stuff that he's going through, which again he talked about in his video. From all we know, he stayed clean, right? We all know about his past drug usage, and hey, anyone who's been through that, it'd be very easy to just kind of go back to whatever your vices or addictions were, and he didn't do that. So I think there's some commendable things. So he made mistakes like a lot of people do. Maybe some we don't know. Maybe there's stuff there's out there that we don't know. But I commend Waller for doing what every fan would want from a guy, right? giving it his all, and when he doesn't want to give it his all anymore, not showing up and collecting a paycheck. So, let's get into the mailbag. Take it away, Steve.
Mail time. Mail time.
The mail's here. Come on. Bye, guys. Here's the mail. It never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
Thanks, Steve from Blue's Clues. Bobby, let's get into the mail. First question. RJ-AT at Inshane We Trust with a 5 instead of an S. Do you not like Eluemunor playing guard because you think he's a better tackle just as much as the continuity reasoning of him being the Neil safety blanket? Physically, I don't see why he can't become as good a guard as a tackle. At least him and Thomas will move people together. So, again, I feel like we've talked about this topic a lot this offseason, but I think it's, you know what, it's one of the biggest things going into this into this season is the offensive line, how it's constructed, what happened. So I don't hate Jermaine Eluemunor playing guard in a perfect world, right? But the reaction right now is acting as if we are in a perfect world, right? And that's because guess what OTAs are? OTAs are the perfect world. Nothing bad happens, unless there's a freak injury. Nothing bad happens, right? Especially on O-line, D-line. Those guys, it's non-contact stuff. So you're not getting, real worries, even though I think some of those guys get beat in the non-contact stuff pretty easily. So we're in this perfect world right now. So, right, it's any argument you make against this is hit back with well, they trust this guy. Neil's got to, be, work at right tackle, blah, blah, blah. No one's going to get injured. It's just the thing is, I hate that. I don't hate Eluemunor as a guard, even though I don't have I don't know where this faith in Eluemunor as a guard is coming from besides the fact good tackle, good guard, which it doesn't always work like that. I just hate that the plan can be wrecked by one thing, and one of a few things, and those things are things that are likely. One is Neil just being continually to be bad, right? We cannot just act like Carm Brasillo is God, and he just fixes every single offensive lineman to ever, grace God's green earth. There's a good chance, if you're looking at statistics and probability, it's more likely than not that Neil is just bad. Still holding out some hope that the guy that was drafted, there's something in there that was there at Alabama that will be unleashed. And I want to see Brasillo work with him. I thought Bobby Johnson was a bad offensive line coach, so I do have some hope, not much faith, but hope. But that's a very likely thing. Also, Evan Neal has been, because he's been bad, it's been talked about that he's been injured, right? He's missed a lot of games. He got injured 3 times in these first 2 seasons with the New York Giants. And at that size and weight, you don't always come back from those. He missed 4 games in 2022, and then he missed 10 this last season. Right? He didn't play well in those other games, so that's a word. Also, Andrew Thomas has an injury history. At this point, it's just Andrew Thomas has injury history, and again, those 3 things can make this whole thing fall apart quickly. Right? Fall apart quickly. And also you have John Runyon playing the right side and instead of his preferred left to help Evan Neal. So if Evan Neal fails, Eluemunor not only has to switch positions, but he has to switch sides as well. Right? I know because John Runyon said in his opening, press conference after he signed with the Giants, hey, I can play both sides, but I prefer to play left if I were to pick. But he has played both sides, right? So to me, it's not about John Runyon having to play one side or the other. It's the fact that you're putting him on the right for Evan Neal. So why are we putting all of these, it's a lot of effort into hoping one player goes from bad to good. And then if that doesn't work, well, now you have John Runyon not in his preferred position, right? That's not the worst thing in the world. But again, Eluemunor has to switch positions from guard to tackle, but also has to switch sides, right? And this idea of a Zudu being a swing offensive tackle is ludicrous to me. And the argument as, well, they don't have enough offensive tackles in OTAs because of injuries. Then put Marcus McKeithen at offensive tackle to get abused by Brian Burks. Not your 3rd year, 67th overall pick. And then again, the idea of they signed a bunch of guys like Stinney, Schlotman, and Matt Nelson. That's not an argument for me. You have to bring 17 guys to camp. So guys signed on minimum contracts is not, investing in the offensive line. It's just getting enough bodies in there. Aaron Stinney's, had a half a season of starting games. Austin Schlotman started 4 games in 2 different year seasons. And then Matt Nelson started 2 games ever. Like, to me, that's not an investment. And then also, I think Jermaine Eluemunor can work at guard if everyone stays healthy and JMS progresses and Evan Neal progresses. But it's not a known. Like, Eluemunor's played one game at right guard in 2022, and he didn't play well in that game, by the way. He played 3 games at right guard in 2021 and didn't play well. And then he's played 10 snaps at left guard in his career, right? So we just paid a guy 2 years, $14 million to play a position that he's played 10 snaps in his entire career. Like, this isn't the Cowboys moving, Tyrone Smith all over the line. Like a future Hall of Famer, proven guy. You're moving him to right, you're moving him to guard just because he can handle it. Like, it's just not that. This Jermaine Eluemunor. I like Jermaine Eluemunor, but treating him like he's just the do-it-all, can do everything, I think is a misjudgment. And I also don't think Jermaine Eluemunor is practicing offensive tackle at all either. Like, we'll see in training camp is when that will truly matter, because he's going to train at both positions when he's in his off time. And that's what really matters for offensive linemen, is not the OTAs, but what you're doing in your own private workouts with your own private coaches, or just in the, in your off-season weight room stuff. But if we go to training camp and Eluemunor is getting very minimum reps at tackle, that's a red flag to me. So again, it's not Eluemunor at guard in a vacuum. It's this plan and how it can it's a house of cards. Like, this offensive line right now is a house of cards where it just takes one card to be moved out of place and the whole thing could come falling down, right? So I just think there should be a better plan. I think there should be a better plan, whether that was, bringing back Ben Bredesen, right? Couldn't have, he signed for what, $3 million for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and maybe he didn't want to be here. If there's anyone who deserve to not want to be here, but Ben Bredesen. But Ben Bredesen's not some great player. But if you brought Bredesen back, you made him your 5th starter, let him lock in. Or you just, now you can truly just practice backup left guard and backup right guard. Not backup center or starting center and then backup guard. And then just, you're the swing guard. I just think that would have been so much better than signing Aaron Stinney for the minimum, right? Like, I just think that would have been a much better investment. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully everyone stays healthy. Hopefully Evan Neal progresses and we all get to live in that perfect world. It's just, Giants' offensive line has not been a perfect world, right? And there's been investments in it. Some of the investments haven't worked out, but failed investments doesn't mean, you stop trying at future ones. Like the idea, they just haven't been able to draft good offensive linemen, so why are they going to keep trying? Like, no. If that's the case, then I don't want you as the GM. If you just have given up on drafting, and I don't think that's the case for Joe Shane. I think he's given up on drafting offensive linemen, but I do think that this plan has been kind of band-aid together and just hoping it works. And if Andrew Thomas gets hurt, then the whole thing is fucked. So that's where I'm at with the Jermaine Eluemunor guard. It's not that I think Jermaine Eluemunor is going to fail at guard. It's a plan that can fall apart quick. All right, next question. Nico Risen says, it's been a while, guys, so do you read ads during off-season mailbags too? And if so, can you read one? Nico, I put this one in here. You cannot, you're grandfathered in, but if you want to continue to be put in this, you just have to say read an ad. We need the command. We don't need it to be a question from you. Everyone else can make it a question. From you, it's just a command. But I'm here to talk to you guys about DraftKings. Bottom of the 9th. 2 outs, bases full, down 3, the crowd on their feet. The drama of baseball is real. And so is the action at DraftKings Sportsbook. From the first pitch to the final out, DraftKings has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. If you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. DraftKings also has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odd boosts, and so much more. I want to do that. I didn't get a chance to do this. I'd like to give my thoughts on the NBA Finals during a DraftKings read every year. So I didn't get to do this before the first 2 games. I actually thought the Mavs would win because I just thought Luka was the best player in the series, and then Kyrie was probably the 3rd best after Jason Tatum. And I was actually rooting for the Mavs, despite the fact that as a Nets fan, I hate Kyrie. I hate everyone that was involved with that Nets team, not just Kyrie. But I actually do hate Kyrie the most, even though I would kind of do it all over again because it gave you a shot in a championship. But Kyrie is choking. 28 points in 2 games, turning the ball over, not getting other guys involved. Well, Luka had a 30-point triple-double, and they lost that game. I think Luka is the best player. I think eventually Luka will be the best player in the NBA. So I thought they were doing, and I was rooting for the Mavs because Jason Kidd is their coach. So Jason Kidd's my favorite player of all time. So that overpowers my Kyrie hate. But it looks like the Celtics are going to take it. But we have seen 2-0 series flip, right? Milwaukee and Phoenix a couple of years ago. Dallas themselves, right? They were down 2-0 to the Miami Heat with, or they were up 2-0 on the Miami Heat, and then D Wade brought them back. So I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna be bold. The Mavs end up pulling this out. They're gonna win the next 2 games at home, and then they'll win game on the road, and then they'll win in Game 7. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code WORLD. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code WORLD on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/baseball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. You'll be glad you did. All right, next question. Zach at PL73. I told Zach that he asked this question for the May mailbag. And I said, save it for the June mailbag because I've been doing some of the Shane Bowen streams. And he asked, how bad do you think the Giants will be against the run this year? I know Bowen has a history of great run defenses, but we just don't have the personnel that Tennessee did at any level of the field. So this is actually a worry for me, right? But now I'll go to the point, like Shane Bowen's run defenses. And I will go in rankings in order of 2023 to 2020. Yards, 13th, 1st, 2nd, 19th. Yards per carry, 4th, 1st, 4th, 18th. EPA, 12th, 1st, 13th, and 18th. So he's had a good run defenses. At worst, mid-run defense his first year. His first year as the defensive coordinator, they had a mid-run defense. So he has a proven track record of stopping the run. But guess who else had a proven record of stopping the run before ranking 30th in yards per carry in back-to-back years? Wink Martindale. The Ravens were the number 1 run defense in 2021. And run defense, to me, scheme matters, right? But run defense is about physicality and discipline. So you can coach like discipline, but you can't coach weight and strength at this point in football. Obviously, you have strength and weight, weight and strength conditioners. But at this point, like you kind of are who you are, and you can get stronger, but you're not going to become like a different player. So for the Titans, there's a couple things. It's not just the defensive tackles or the edge. I think a big part of this truly is the cornerback room. Like Roger McCreary was a fucking dude for them at nickel cornerback versus the run game. Is Drew Phillips going to be? Like he has the physicality for it, but he's not like he's a bad tackler. You have Cordell Flott who gets bullied. Deonte Banks, he's a good tackler, but I do think he struggles to get off blocks as a rookie, and that kind of showed up at Maryland too. Like that was the note I had on coming out of Maryland. It's like, hey, good tackler, but struggles to get off blocks in the run game. And you had Murphy Bunting last year for the Titans, who did really well as that outside corner. Like their corners were a big part of it, and Roger McCreary, the nickel corner, was huge. The nickel corner has become so important as far as your run defense, and I think it was a part of the Giants. Like the Giants last year. Right, Bobby Okereke played so well. You had Michael McFadden who played really well next to him. Then you had Ashawn Robinson and Dexter Lawrence, who were 2 of the best run-stopping defensive tackles in the NFL. Why was the run defense bad? Because a lot of it had to do with the DBs and the edges. Right, like now you have 2 edges who are inconsistent as run defenders, and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, and then you have an extremely thin group on the defensive tackle side of things. The hope is that where it can be different is that the structure of this defense being too high with like the safety rotating down late is that it keeps the run game inside, right? And that allows Dex to be the player maker that he is and, increase his tackle for loss and run stop numbers. And Bobby Okereke is a better linebacker than what they had. I still worry about Michael McFadden in this defense. In the Wink Martindale's defense, it was a perfect fit for him. If there's anyone on this defense that stock could go down because of the new defensive coordinator, it would be Micah McFadden. But the hope is like this structure will keep the backs keep the offense's run game inside, and that allows your two best players on defense, Dexter Lawrence and Bobby Okereke, or two of your three best, to be the best version of themselves and put a lot on those guys' plate. But they're going to have to do it. So yeah, I am worried about this run game. And again, it's just go watch the film and watch how important Sean Murphy-Bunting and Roger McCreary were for the Titans defense. And I just don't think we're going to get that out of this DB group for the Giants this year. So I have a real worry of that. And I think it showed up for the Giants last year, right? I don't think the Giants' run game was bad in between the tackles last year, like it was the year in 2022 when they had no defensive tackle depth. They had awful linebacker play. Because look, Okereke and Mike McFadden, I think they're the only two the linebacker duo that had 10 plus tackles for loss. A'Shawn Robinson, I think, was number one for run stop rate in the NFL, and Dexter Lawrence was like third. Kayvon had double digits tackles for loss, not the best edge setter. Jihad Ward could set an edge but wasn't going to finish the play. Like, you didn't have the best guys on the edge, but you had capable. A lot of the big plays happened because of the DBs. A lot of them happened to that. So we'll see. But that is a worry. Like, I don't just chalk it up as up. Well, guess what? Shane Bowen, he stops the run. We're going to stop the run. That's kind of what I thought would happen with Wink Martindale, and I was obviously wrong with that. All right, next question. Ryan, at Giants_Ryan. Which Giants role player are you most excited for this upcoming season? So this is a tough question because the Giants aren't like a great roster. So it's like, what role player can, like, the role players get elevated into like non-role players, but there's two that stick out for me. Or maybe two positions, right? The first one would be Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, or Jalen Hyatt. All right, Hyatt, I'm looking forward to seeing what Hyatt is, right? Did Hyatt develop? I'm a little worried that like the expectations could be like, hey, he's going to come in, he's going to be the number two, he's this deep threat, he's going to refine his game, and I worry that maybe that he just could be a deep threat, right? I do have that worry, but it's just the wide receiver room as a whole outside of Malik Neighbors. Like Darius Slayton could finally get like wide receiver 2 coverage, and we know we have a quarterback in Daniel Jones who is not going to force it to like the number one player on the team. So that could help Darius Slayton out, and then Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Now that you have someone, two guys on the outside that can take the top off and run the full route tree, does that allow Wan'Dale Robinson just to operate under a lot more space? So it's just kind of that wide receiver space, like room as a whole. Like seeing what those guys can do with Neighbors as wide receiver 1 will just be nice, especially with Daboll calling the plays. Like, I think Daboll will do a good job. Like, hey, this game plan, our wide receiver 2 is going to cook their cornerback 2. Or this game, we're just going to pepper the slot all game. We're going to pepper the slot, and we're going to get Wan'Dale Robinson and Yak plays. So it'll be interesting to see what Neighbors does for the other guys. The other one is someone who's, like, gets talked about so little now that you forget he's on the roster. And it's that Azeez Ojulari is the third rusher after Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. Like, we're 1 year removed from him having a higher pressure percentage than all-pro Dexter Lawrence in 2022, right? Like, let me ask you a question, not just pressure percentage because he didn't play a lot of snaps because he dealt with an injury. Who had a higher pass rush win rate in 2022? Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, or Azeez Ojulari? Who had the highest? Azeez Ojulari did. Like, we're 1 year removed from that. And, you saw the flashes as a rookie, but you're like, it's just, you need more consistency. And then you found the consistency the next year, but he just got injured. And then last year was injured, and then when he did play, he just was bad. It's going to be interesting to see what Azeez Ojulari's role in the NFL is as that third rusher, but that could be somewhat like the perfect role for him. And if he can stay like halfway healthy, I think bringing him back on a reasonable contract would not be out of off the table for me. Like putting less of a workload, but I just worry that he's going to be stuck with as an injury prone player. But those were the two for me. Like I tried going like. Nobody in the running back room, I don't think you can call a role player. The tight ends, now that Waller's gone, you're either just a starter or the backup. I didn't want to include rookies in this because obviously you could say like, oh, Tyler Nubin, Theo John. Like I just didn't include rookies in this. But it's like all the other players, it's like they're just kind of just key members. Even the wide receiver one's cheating a little bit. All right, next question. Chris Gerard at Gerard Chris _Chris. I think I pronounced that correctly. How do you think the offense will change with Daboll calling plays? More or less pre-snap motion, more schemed up D shots, etc. So I'd actually like someone to ask this question again in the next mailbag because I want to do a little more research and maybe go back and watch some Buffalo film again with Brian Daboll calling the plays. But I think you saw more of the Brian Daboll identity this offense came out as the year went along, right? There was more, like, you really saw down the stretch plays that come from the Buffalo playbook, and I'm not going to sit here and try and break down plays, and get spammed, right? Whether it was that shock concept that I broke down, wave, which is like a long developing play, and was just like you're going to see running the same concepts, but just out of different formations. Like that's a Brian Daboll specialty. It's like, hey, everyone's got to be able to run every single route because we're going to put you in different formations and we're going to run the same concept, right? We're going to run dagger, and this time Wan'Dale Robinson's going to be the dig, or Isaiah Hodgins is going to be the dig on it, and this player is going to be the underneath route. So I think you'll see that. At least to start, I think you're going to see more plays that call for hanging in the pocket and trusting the protection, right? Like that's the Brian Daboll, like kind of force that quarterback to hang in there and trust protection. Now, Daboll will transform to what he's doing to fit the quarterback and the team overall. Like we saw them drastically change a few times in 2022. You saw them change with Tommy DeVito, and then they got back to their aggressive ways with DeVito and Tyrod Taylor towards the end of the year. I just think they're going to want to be aggressive. And I think unlike in 2022, if they're aggressive and it's not working, even though they won those first 2 games of the year, but if they're aggressive and it's like Daniel Jones is not pulling the trigger on stuff or protection's not holding up, I think the change would be to let's see what we have in Drew Lock. Because at least he's going to push the ball and that type of stuff. Unless it's just so obviously offensive line that's stopping it. I also have some worries on it too. I worry about the identity of the run game. Like that was the issue. One of the issues in Buffalo was they were, quote unquote versatile, but they never had an identity as a run game, and that got better. Buffalo Bills run game got better with his departure. So I just hope that they can, with him and Carmen Brasillo, they can figure out a run game identity and play to it, and not just we're mixed, we're half zone, we're half gap. No, get an identity, play to your player's strengths. Bring back pin and pull. Just figure out what you do best and do that and try and master it with your offensive line instead of having, the every single run concept that you're practicing every week. Get an identity and master it. So yeah, that I expect a little more aggression and a little more of this is what we do. But I would actually like to go back and look at motion numbers and stuff. The Chiefs were always the highest with motion. That's where Kafka comes from. I don't know if the Bills, Daboll's Bills were like that, but we'll have to go back and look at some stuff. Next question, Dougie Fresh 86. I've got nothing, so just read an ad. I want to talk to you guys about Magic Spoon, and it's not sorcery, it's magic. Magic Spoon, what is it? It's a cereal. I'm cereal that they are a cereal. They've got a variety pack, guys. 4 flavors are cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. Peanut butter cereal? What? That's got to be unhealthy. It's not. This pack has 0 grams of sugar. 0. 13 to 14 grams of protein? What? And 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Only 140 calories a serving. That sounds good to me. It's high protein, has 0 grams of sugar, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. How about that? No soy boys with this cereal. Peanut butter is my favorite. I mean, I'm just a peanut butter guy. And I think you can mix the peanut butter and cocoa, and then you have cocoa peanut. I mean, it's basically, I won't say another brand name, but you're basically getting that type of cereal, but it's also healthy. So you gotta check it out. It's just crunchy. It's good. It's delicioso, as the Spaniards would say. So go to magicspoon.com/Giants to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code GIANTS at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/Giants and use the code GIANTS to save $5 off. You'll be glad you did. All right, next question. We have Mike Colsting at M. Colsting. Joe Shane seems to like trading 6th or 7th round picks for players. Basham and Sims last year. What position or what specific player could you see him making a move for in training camp? So I actually did a live stream about this about a month ago. And I just want to throw some names. I got a lot of notes on it, but I'm not going to go through them all. There's one big splash out there. And I would kind of love it, but I would hate it with the way, again, there's like this Darren Waller thing just went. Now, the Panthers picked up this guy's 5th-year option. But J.C. Horn, right? Like, now usually you look for guys who had, like, their 5th option declined, like Isaiah Simmons, and you trade bare minimum for them. Horn had his 5th-year option picked up, despite the lack of ability to stay on the field. But we've also seen the Panthers willing to part ways with much more available and better players, like Brian Burns, DJ Moore, and Chris McCaffrey. And again, not get the best value in return. Joe Schoen has like a relationship with their GM Dan Morgan from their time in Buffalo, and we obviously did, the Brian Burns trade, which is pretty low compensation considering the player. I really like J.C. Horn. He just can't stay healthy. He played 3 games as a rookie, 13 in year 2, and then only 6 games last season. But when he plays, he's dominant. Like he's a great corner when he plays. Like he only allowed 26 yards per game last season, 23 yards per game in 2022, and when he played almost the entire season. So you have this tough, physical, good young cornerback, but it's hard to see how they view him despite that, right? So would they be willing to do that? This is one that like I just threw out as an idea. Probably wouldn't pull the trigger on it. Like I don't know what it would take, whether it's like a pick, maybe a 4th and a 5th pick swap, or maybe a 4th or 5th straight up. A pick swap, I probably would do it. If you ask me, hey, a 4th and a 5th pick swap for J.C. Horn, I would do it. For a pick straight up, I wouldn't do it. And he's not going to go for the 7th round pick. The Giants do have 2 7th round picks this year because of the Boogie Basham pick swap. So I don't see that one happening. The one that I could really like to see is Robert Hainsey, right? He's a 2021 3rd round offensive lineman by the Bucs. The Bucs drafted Graham Barton in the 1st, Cody Mauch in the 2nd last year, and then they signed our good old friend Ben Bredesen. Hainsey has been their starter at center the last 2 seasons. He had a solid 2022 and then a rough 2023. Like that could be a move to, one, get center depth or guard depth, or maybe you view him as a starting center, right? Like you can, and I think that would matter. So like you can get him like for a 7th round, a backup offensive lineman for a 7th round pick, or another pick swap. Like he's an expiring contract. That's a move that I would love to make. Kyer Elam from the Bills, like was a 2022 1st round pick by the Bills, and Joe Schoen was part of that process for for 9 months of it, and knew the Bills board. But he was a healthy scratch for them at times last season, right? He's been bad, giving up 75% of his targets and been targeted a lot, but he's undoubtedly talented. I wasn't the biggest Elam fan. I didn't think he was a 1st round player. I actually liked Alontae Taylor a lot better than him. Do the Bills want to carry a 3rd-year 1st round pick as a backup, or try and get something back for him like they did with Boogie Basham last year? That could be another one. Andrew Booth, another corner, like Vikings 2022 2nd round pick, who was viewed as a 1st rounder out of Clemson. He's only played 250 defensive snaps the last 2 seasons. Numbers were great on a per snap basis in 2023, but he just didn't get the amount of snaps. So those are just like some names that I kind of, I did an exercise for a live stream about a month ago doing that. And those are the names that popped up for me. All right, next question. Chris at Chris__bomb, BAUM. Bomb. With Waller likely retiring, how much do you think that'll impact Bellinger's snaps as a fullback? How about that? Thank you, Chris, for allowing me to talk about the fullback. You guys thought I was going to get through this whole episode not talking about the fullback that the Giants don't have. So having your starting tight end as your fullback isn't optimal, but you can make it work like they did in 2022. But you have to have someone else that can do it, right? But that's Theo Johnson's weak point as a blocker, is like the lead blocking stuff. Chris Manhurst didn't do it much. Like, is Jack Stahl? Again, I'm going to keep beating the table for this, right? And I saw Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl director, had a tweet go viral of like, what's, your boomer take? It's like not enough NFL teams use a fullback, right? Like it's the idea that using a fullback, honestly, I think you tell on yourself when you're like, oh, fullback, because that's outdated. Like that was the thought like 6-7 years ago. Now you look at the best offensive minds in the game, they use fullbacks. Look at the top scoring offenses in the NFL. They all use fullback except for the Kansas City Chiefs, and they have Patrick Mahomes. Mike McDaniel's, he's an offensive wizard. Kyle Shanahan, Gage Burkhead, all these guys. They all use fullbacks. The only like great offensive coaches that don't in today's game are Sean McVay, who uses a slot wide receiver as a fullback, like in Cooper Kupp. And like put such an emphasis in wide receiver blocking, and then Andy Reid. Like those are the only 2 guys. So Again, the Giants offensive line coach has run game clinics about the importance of the run game with the fullback. His fullback over the last 6 years with the Patriots and the Raiders is available. Go sign Jakob Johnson and get a fullback. Now how do you replace Darren Waller on this roster? Sign a fullback. Just wanted to hit on that very quickly. All right, next question. This is one that I'm glad to talk about. Michael Tauber at Tauber_M. Should the NFL draft be a lottery similar to the NBA? Where do you realistically see the Giants? I'm not reading that part of the question. But should the NFL have a draft lottery? And this is something that I have thought for the longest time. Now, I put this out there like a month ago, and I realized I pitched it to the wrong. Like, I'm pitching this to Knicks fans, so your guys aren't going to like this. Like, you've been burned by the draft lottery, so you don't want a draft lottery. I understand that, but I think it makes so many sense from like a competition standpoint to TV. Like, if talk about the NFL doing any decision for money, this would be a cash cow. Like, and here's my thing: why should losing games be so heavily incentivized when you have these Saturday, Sunday schedule games at the end of the season, right? Like, why is that? Like, fantasy football is a huge part of the game of football now, right? Why does not playing your starters such like a smart thing to do at the end of the season if they're battling through an injury, right? Like, why have a GM or head coach in that spot where they actually have to think about that? Like, if a team wants to do it, make it a huge risk, right? And you look at it, like, and tanking doesn't really happen in the NFL, and if it does, it happens in like a 1-game sample size. But guess what? Like, Doug Peterson lost his job over this shit. So like, let's just completely take that off the menu, and then it would be must-see TV. Like, I think it would have higher ratings than any regular season game. I truly believe that. Like, you make that a 2-hour special. Like, again, I think it would do better ratings than any NFL regular season game. I think it might do better than the conference championship games. Like, you'd have 18 teams, fans taking in more NFL content. Like hoping, like put that shit April 1st, right? Actually, no, you'd have to put it before free agency. Excuse me, but like put it the day, a week before free agent, March 1st or whatever. Like, so you'd have 18 teams just taking in, fan bases taking in more NFL content. And I don't subscribe to the fact that you should be just awarded the number one pick because you suck. Like, I kind of hate that. And we haven't seen it like pay off for teams either, right? Because it's like you put these number one pick quarterbacks on these teams and they're just bad. Like, even if they're good, they just it's so hard for them to get to the pinnacle. Like, here's the number one pick quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl with the drafted team. Eli Manning, technically, I'm not even going to count that, since 1970. So you have Peyton Manning, Troy Aikman, John Elway, and Terry Bradshaw since 1970, who have won Super Bowls for the teams that drafted the number one overall. Peyton Manning, obviously he's one that worth it. Troy Aikman, obviously a Hall of Famer, but like, those were great teams. Those were great, like, you don't see teams the number one pick turn into those rosters. John Elway won, the last 2 years of his career, but they made the Super Bowl a couple of times. And then Terry Bradshaw playing behind the steel curtain, won those 4 Super Bowls. So it just hasn't like worked out for teams. And just think about like, as like just a general NFL fan, how much more exciting is it that Caleb Williams is joining a team that has some talent with the Chicago Bears instead of the rudderless Carolina Panthers, right? Obviously, the Panthers should have that pick if they didn't do the Bryce Young trade, but like, it's just, I'm so much more excited about Caleb Williams' rookie season now that he's on the Bears instead of the Panthers, where the Panthers is like, hopefully they don't ruin him. So, like, tanking in the NFL is just hard enough today, but it would just eliminate it from the vocabulary. Me, personally, I hate the idea of tanking. I talked about it this past year, but it sucks to talk about. And like, I just think it'd be must-see TV. I actually went to NBA Tankathon and just filled in the blanks with, like, it's only 14 teams compared to the 18 to be in the NFL. But just, like, what would happen, and just did one. Funny enough, the Bears would have went up from 9 to 1, getting Caleb Williams. So they would have lost the first pick, but gained it with with their regular pick. The Falcons would have went from 8 to 2, Jaden Daniels. Then this one made me a little happy. Giants would have went from 6 to 3, Drake May. Hopefully the Falcons didn't take May. The Cardinals stayed at 4, Marvin Harrison Jr. The Bears would have dropped from 1 to 5, Malik Neighbors. Could you imagine that? Like, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze is going to be fun, but imagine Malik Neighbors instead. That'd be nuts. Commanders dropped from 2 to 6, Michael Penix. Patriots from 3 to 7, JJ McCarthy. Chargers from 5 to 8, stick with Joe Alt. And then the Titans from 7 to 9 would stick with JC Latham. Like, I just think it'd be so much more exciting. And again, I don't like the worst team in the NFL getting it. And I also don't like the fact that a fan like has to like be mad, like, oh, I can't believe you're celebrating this win. Screw you. Like I paid tickets to go to that Patriots game. I don't want to be mad when the Patriots miss a game winning field goal or game tying field goal. All right, speaking of the draft, next question. Where are we at with time? All right, yeah, I got time for 2 more questions. Fresh at the last D Fresh. Is it I won't ask any questions. If the Giants go Daniel Jones free agent route next year at quarterback, what do you envision in being the biggest first round need? I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it would be funny if just offensive tackle could be the most glaring need once again. I did mock the Giants to go offensive tackle 4 years in a row. Jonah Williams in 2019 at pick 17, Thomas at 4 in 2020, Rashawn Slater at 11. Our team would be a lot better if we just stuck there and picked Rashawn Slater, who was available. And then I went Neal at either 5 or 7. Sauce Gardner was the other pick I did there. Obviously, he went before the Giants. Defensive tackle, which is great because of all the people telling me we can't take Kalijah Kancey in 2022 or 23 because of Leonard Williams and Ashawn Robinson. But I just can see myself falling in love with a defensive tackle. And I think that'd be a huge need to put just putting together a front 4. Like I've been doing the countdown of like till Giants football, so going through the 90s has like all these pass rushers, JPP, Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan. And it just is like, man, having a dominant pass rush and 4 to 6 guys is just sick. So I could just see myself falling in love with the defensive tackle. And then that Michigan cornerback, Will Johnson, he looked really good against, I didn't even know who he was, but I was watching Rome Odunze film versus Michigan. I was like, this Will Johnson kid can play. And then you look at the way too early mocks and you see him mocked like top 5 at times. So cornerback could obviously be a big need. If Cordell Flott doesn't shockingly doesn't turn into a good cornerback too. So those are like the 3 positions that are like on my radar. I also, depending on when you're picking, I wouldn't mind going back-to-back wide receiver. I know people like always just view need, like I think it'd be sick. Like right, like imagine, like let's live in a land where Jalen Hyatt doesn't develop the way that we want, and we're picking 18th. Darius Slayton is he gets $15 million a year because the wide receiver market's booming, and the Giants just draft Emeka Egbuka. That'd be pretty sick. All right, next question. Last question. Bengal Prince at the Kib Ahmed 2. I probably wanted Kid, but maybe that handle wasn't available. Top 5 all-time offseason Giants drama. Go. So, again, because I live in Florida and I wasn't covering this team up until 2019, quote-unquote covering, I don't have like all the drama, and before social media, the stuff wasn't out there as much. So I kind of went like a little bit with like recency bias. But like the Odell cocaine thing in 2018, like there was like, you thought that he was going to get traded in 2018. Like supposedly the Rams offered 2 first-round picks. That one would be on there. But even then, that wasn't like surprising anyone. It was just like, all right, are the Giants going to be fed up with Odell under this new regime? I actually think like an underrated one was the Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, Odell, Eli of 2019. Right, we're just shocked we're just being thrown across the bow by everyone. Whether it's Baker's interview where he's like, I can't believe they drafted Daniel Jones. Odell saying, oh, I got to get used to the ball being thrown hard, and then Eli having to respond or not respond, and so that was always there. Some of the earlier ones I remember, the Wood Strahan retire. I remember sitting at a restaurant at south of the border, at the South Carolina North Carolina border, and just being like, Strahan, please show up to camp. And I just think he didn't want to show up to camp, but that was a huge one. Like we thought Strahan would retire, and we end up winning the Super Bowl. Do we win the Super Bowl without Strahan? Like that's a big what if right there. The 2004 draft, that was obviously one that we all remember that one. And then to me, the crazy one was the DeAndre Baker arrest. Like that was such a nuts story. All the different turns, and you go back and look at it. I think we've never been more correct about something. Like me and Justin predicted everything that happened in that case, like from the fact that like we thought they were being set up and that there was probably some hush money, and the fact that we thought like I said in the initial episode, I think the Chargers are going to get dropped, and guess what? They got dropped against DeAndre Baker. Now the Giants didn't give a shit. They knew they were going to release him. Once it happened, there was never a thought that they might keep him. It was always they could release him. at the time. Maybe if I knew that at the time, or if this happened now, I would just be more resigned to the fact that they would do it. But we were fighting like, hey, this guy, yeah, is he a good guy? Probably not. But this isn't what it seems. Like the idea that DeAndre Baker just went to some, some backyard barbecue and decided to pull out a gun. It was always naive. And then you know that like prosecutors always going to trump up charges, especially when you got some big names involved. I was live streaming like his initial, his bond hearing, his bond hearing on Periscope. We just went nuts. I'm surprised we didn't make t-shirts. That was just, and then like in the middle of that, like Aldrich Rosas got arrested in the weirdest way ever, where it's like, yeah, it was 100 miles per hour. He had no shoes on. He got into an accident, but he wasn't arrested for DUI. Like, what the hell is going on here? And then the Giants got Graham Gano out of it, which ended up working out. So hey, go wish Justin some health. The guy freaking needs it. He's sick all the damn time. We appreciate you guys. We'll be back Friday. I think we're going to have an interview. Giants wrap up minicamp this week before they go off for summer break. Please don't get arrested in that time. We always give that send-off at the end of that episode. So we'll see you then. Appreciate you guys very much. Until then, let's go Big Blue.